A new United States military strike in the eastern Pacific Ocean has left 4 people dead, marking the latest escalation in a growing series of maritime operations targeting vessels Washington says are operated by drug trafficking networks with alleged links to designated terrorist organizations, according to information released by U.S. Southern Command. The operation focused on a high-speed boat that intelligence officials had tracked along what they describe as a known narcotics smuggling route. The U.S. government stated that the vessel was operated by a group officially designated as a terrorist organization and that it was carrying illicit drugs. The 4 individuals aboard, identified by U.S. authorities as narco-terrorists, were killed during the strike. The incident took place on December 4 and was first made public through a post on the official account of U.S. Southern Command. The command published footage showing an aerial view of the engagement, followed by written confirmation that the decision to carry out the strike was made under the direction of U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. In the post, the command stated, on December 4, under the direction of @SecWar Pete Hegseth, Joint Task Force Southern Spear conducted a lethal kinetic strike against a vessel in international waters operated by a designated terrorist organization. Intelligence confirmed the vessel was transporting illicit narcotics and transiting a known drug trafficking route in the eastern Pacific. 4 male narco-terrorists aboard the vessel were eliminated. The footage released does not include audio and shows the moment of the strike from an airborne platform. This marks the latest in a series of U.S. military operations that have increasingly relied on precision strikes against small maritime craft suspected of transporting drugs across the Pacific and Caribbean. According to U.S. authorities, this campaign has now resulted in a total of 87 deaths linked to counter-drug strikes over recent months. The operations have been publicly framed as part of a larger effort to degrade criminal networks that U.S. officials say operate beyond the reach of traditional law enforcement mechanisms. The administration of President Donald Trump, now serving his second term, has defended the campaign as a necessary response to what it describes as the merging of criminal and militant groups in parts of the region. Officials argue that the use of military force is justified under U.S. law and international norms because the groups targeted have been officially designated as terrorist organizations and are involved in narcotics trafficking that impacts U.S. national security. However, the strategy has been the subject of considerable criticism, particularly following another incident earlier in the year that sparked widespread debate. On September 2, U.S. forces conducted a second strike on the wreckage of a vessel that had already been disabled. That attack killed 2 survivors who, according to U.S. officials at the time, were still considered hostile actors. Critics argued that the strike appeared to target individuals who were no longer posing an immediate threat. The U.S. government, however, has maintained that the operation was lawful and necessary because it occurred in an active combat environment involving individuals classified as members of a terrorist organization. Images from recent cabinet meetings show President Trump listening closely to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth as discussions continue regarding U.S. operations in the Pacific and Caribbean regions. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also been present during these meetings, appearing alongside the President and Defense Secretary as the administration outlines its strategic objectives. The public release of these images underscores the high-level attention the administration is placing on the counter-drug and counter-terrorism campaign at sea. The U.S. government has also deployed significant naval assets to support the operations. This includes the USS Gerald R. Ford, which remains one of the largest aircraft carriers ever built and represents the centerpiece of recent military movements in the region. Footage from separate NATO exercises earlier in the year shows F-18 fighter jets and E-2 Hawkeye aircraft operating from the carrier during drills in the North Sea. Although these images come from a different context, they illustrate the capabilities that form part of the fleet currently available to U.S. operational planners. U.S. Southern Command has described the maritime campaign as both a counter-drug mission and part of a broader confrontation against what the administration defines as narco-terrorist threats operating in the Western Hemisphere. This framing has prompted concerns from some regional governments who argue that the militarization of drug policy risks raising geopolitical tensions at a delicate moment. These concerns have been voiced most prominently by Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, who has repeatedly accused Washington of using drug interdiction efforts as a pretext to destabilize his government. Speaking at a public event, Maduro waved to supporters while reiterating his claim that U.S. military actions near Venezuelan waters are politically motivated and designed to justify pressure on Caracas. The United States rejects these accusations, insisting that its operations target only vessels tied to organizations legally designated as terrorist groups, and that all strikes are based on confirmed intelligence. According to the Department of Defense, the strike that took place in the Eastern Pacific followed a period of surveillance during which intelligence services monitored the vessel's movements, confirmed its suspected cargo, and assessed that it was operating under the authority of a known militant criminal network. Officials say the decision to use force in such circumstances follows strict operational protocols. The latest incident once again highlights the scale and complexity of maritime drug trafficking in the region, particularly across vast stretches of the Pacific Ocean where small, fast vessels known as go-fast boats attempt to move shipments northward. These vessels often travel without lights, identification markers, or communication equipment, making them difficult to interdict through conventional means. In recent years, U.S. military and law enforcement agencies have increasingly relied on drones, aircraft, and naval platforms to detect and monitor them. Joint Task Force Southern Spear, the unit involved in the December 4 strike, is one of several operational components that support U.S. efforts to track and intercept such vessels. The task force has been active in both the Pacific and Caribbean theaters, using a combination of surveillance aircraft and rapid response strike capabilities. The U.S. government has argued that these operations are intended to disrupt criminal networks that profit from drug trafficking and use the proceeds to finance militant activity in various regions. Nevertheless, human rights organizations and some governments in Latin America have expressed concern about the nature of the operations, particularly regarding the use of lethal force at sea. Activists argue that the opaque designation of narco-terrorists raises questions about transparency and the legal standards governing such engagements. They point out that many details about the identities of those killed during strikes have not been publicly disclosed, and they question whether all individuals involved in these operations meet the threshold for designation under U.S. law. The government maintains that it releases information consistent with operational security requirements and that each operation is subject to internal review. The maritime campaign also comes at a time of heightened political and economic pressures across the region. Many countries in Latin America continue to grapple with the impact of drug trafficking and the violence associated with transnational criminal groups. At the same time, relationships with the United States vary widely, with some governments seeking closer cooperation and others voicing concerns about the potential consequences of U.S. military actions near their territorial waters. Venezuela remains one of the most vocal critics of the U.S. approach. President Maduro has been engaged in a long-running political and diplomatic confrontation with Washington, accusing the U.S. of attempting to undermine his government through economic sanctions, diplomatic measures, and now, according to him, through military operations framed as anti-drug actions. Maduro has argued that the presence of advanced U.S. naval assets in the Caribbean is disproportionate and politically motivated. The United States has repeatedly denied these allegations, insisting that its deployments are aimed exclusively at countering drug trafficking and related security threats. The deployment of the USS Gerald R. Ford to the Caribbean has drawn particular attention. Although aircraft carrier groups are typically associated with high-intensity military operations, U.S. officials say their presence helps provide surveillance, deterrence, and rapid response capabilities for counter-drug missions. The aircraft carrier's air wing includes a mix of fighter jets and airborne early warning aircraft that can monitor large maritime areas for extended periods. US officials have emphasized that the operations are conducted in international waters and in accordance with US and international law. They argue that drug trafficking routes in the Pacific and Caribbean pose long-standing security challenges, and that the emergence of organizations designated as terrorist groups within these networks elevates the threat. The United States contends that these organizations use drug revenue to support violent activities that destabilize regions and contribute to migration pressures, corruption, and armed conflict. In addition to military operations, the U.S. maintains partnerships with regional governments involved in counter-drug and counter-terrorism missions. These partnerships include intelligence sharing, joint patrols, and support for local law enforcement agencies. However, the extent of cooperation varies significantly from country to country, and some governments have resisted participating in operations involving the use of lethal force. The December 4 strike underscores the evolving nature of U.S. counter-drug policy, which has increasingly intersected with national security priorities. The operational integration of military assets into anti-drug campaigns represents a strategic shift that advocates say reflects the changing structure of criminal organizations. Many of these organizations now operate with levels of sophistication and firepower that resemble militant groups, prompting calls within U.S. policy circles for a more robust response. Critics, however, caution that the reliance on military force risks escalating tensions and may lead to unintended consequences. They warn that such operations could complicate diplomatic efforts, especially in regions where political dynamics are already unstable. Some analysts have argued that a broader strategy addressing economic, social, and governance factors is necessary to reduce the influence of criminal networks. Despite the criticisms, U.S. authorities show no indication of scaling back the operations, the confirmation issued by U.S. Southern Command, following the December strike, reiterates the government's position that such actions are necessary to protect national security and combat what officials describe as an evolving narco-terrorist threat. The statement highlights intelligence assessments that link drug trafficking routes in the Pacific to groups involved in activities that fall under U.S. terrorist designations. The strike adds another layer to the complex geopolitical environment surrounding U.S. engagement in the Western Hemisphere. The intersection of counter-drug efforts, military strategy, and regional diplomacy continues to shape relations between Washington and governments across Latin America. As more information becomes available, officials from various countries are expected to respond to the latest developments, either expressing support for the operations or raising new concerns about their implications. In the meantime, the United States has reiterated that it will continue monitoring maritime traffic in both the Pacific and Caribbean as part of its ongoing counter-drug mission. Officials say additional operations may be conducted if intelligence indicates that vessels are carrying narcotics or operating under the direction of groups designated as terrorist organizations. The government maintains that its actions, including the most recent strike, are carried out with the aim of disrupting networks that contribute to regional instability and pose security threats extending beyond national borders. The December 4 strike in the Eastern Pacific, resulting in the deaths of 4 individuals identified by U.S. authorities as narco-terrorists, stands as another example of the Trump administration's expanding use of military force in counter-drug operations. With tensions rising and regional leaders voicing divergent reactions, the situation remains fluid. The U.S. government continues to defend the operations as both lawful and necessary, while critics argue that greater transparency and diplomatic engagement are required to address the broader implications of such actions. For now, the United States confirms that the strike was carried out based on verified intelligence and that its counter-drug campaign in the Pacific and Caribbean will continue.